I've always believed that the most beautiful and safe places can hide the darkest secrets. Now just imagine, you live in a neighborhood where everyone seems to have the perfect life, with luxury homes, smiling families, and quiet streets. But what would you do if you found out that right next door, a terrible tragedy was about to happen? Today, we're going to uncover what really went on inside the home of one of Brentwood's most respected families. You'll see how a life that seemed dreamlike turned into a real nightmare. Stay with me until the end of this video, because the outcome of this story is going to bring that twist that you who love a good mystery have been waiting for. Brentwood, Tennessee, in April 2013, was the kind of place where people imagined living a quiet and safe life. With its stunning landscapes and luxurious residences, it seemed like paradise on earth. Brentwood is known as one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the United States, where celebrities and successful businessmen mingle in a community that values privacy and quiet. Against this backdrop of wealth and prestige, it's hard to believe that something terrible could happen, especially in such a safe place. At the time, Brentwood was home to Rachael Maidens, a 34-year-old orthodontist who had a life that many would envy. Rachael was not only a successful professional, she was also a devoted mother to her 2-year-old daughter, Natalie. Married to Randy Maidens, a pharmaceutical sales manager, she seemed to have it all: a brilliant career, a magnificent home in the exclusive Governor's Club, and a family that appeared to be happy. But behind this facade, something much darker was going on. Rachael was a strong woman who had overcome a painful past. Her father, Richard Frisbee, was arrested when she was still a student, accused of selling drugs illegally. The shame was so great that he took his own life, leaving Rachael and her family devastated. Despite this, Rachael moved on, determined to build a successful life for herself and her daughter. Randy Maidens, on the other hand, was a man who seemed increasingly distant from the life his wife had built. 3 months before the tragedy, he began to show signs of instability, sinking into alcohol and possibly drugs. He was walking away from his job, and his behavior was becoming increasingly erratic and dangerous. In January of that year, he was seen in a restaurant, visibly drunk and carrying a shotgun cartridge in his pocket. Even so, the authorities did not arrest him, allowing him to be taken home by Rachael, who was probably already feeling the weight of living with such an unpredictable man. Rachael Maidens was a remarkable woman. Graduating with honors, she had built a successful career as an orthodontist, opening her own practice in Brentwood. She was a respected figure in her community, known for her intelligence and dedication. But despite all her achievements, Rachael carried the scars of the past. The loss of her father, who died so tragically, left a deep mark on her life. However, she never allowed this to stop her from moving on. Rachael married Randy, hoping to build a family and a stable life, but what she didn't know was that Randy was struggling with his own demons. Randy Maidens grew up in a middle-class family, without great luxuries but with a comfortable life. He had an ordinary childhood, but when he became an adult, he became involved in the corporate world, working as a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company in Brentwood. At first, his marriage to Rachael seemed like the realization of a dream. They lived in an impressive mansion and had a lovely daughter. However, as time went by, Randy began to feel overwhelmed by the pressure and expectations that came with his seemingly perfect life. The events leading up to the crime began to unfold when Randy began to show clear signs of instability. He was drinking too much and possibly using drugs, which began to affect his behavior and decisions. The incident at the restaurant was a clear sign that something was very wrong, but the authorities and perhaps even Rachael didn't realize how dangerous he could become. As Randy's behavior worsened, Rachael was probably trying to keep up appearances, taking care of her daughter and keeping her clinic running. But inside the house, the situation was becoming untenable. Randy was drifting further and further apart, and the tension between the two was about to explode into a tragedy that no one could have predicted. And so we come to the critical moment in this story, where Randy and Rachael's choices and behaviors began to chart a path of no return, leading to one of the most shocking crimes Brentwood has ever witnessed. On the morning of April 21st, 2013, the scene inside the Maidens mansion in Brentwood was terrifying. It all started with a desperate call from Betty Frisbee, Rachael's mother, to the police. She was worried about her daughter after a strange conversation with her son-in-law, Randy Maidens. Betty sensed that something terrible had happened and asked the police to go immediately to Rachel's house. When the officers arrived, they found the house apparently calm, but something was wrong. The curtains were all closed and no one answered the knocks on the door. The officers decided to enter the house through the garage, which luckily was open. As they entered, the silence was broken by the crying of a child. Upstairs, little Natalie, just 2 years old, was alone in her crib, crying and not understanding what was happening. As they descended the stairs, the officers were confronted with a horrific scene. Rachael Maidens' body lay on the floor of the hallway between the living room and the master bedroom. She had been brutally murdered. There were blood stains on the walls and floor, and the strong smell of bleach indicated that someone had tried to clean up the crime scene, but to no avail. Rachael was hit by 8 shots from a 9mm pistol, as well as 2 shots from a shotgun. The killer had acted in a calculated manner, choosing lethal weapons and firing multiple times to ensure that Rachael had no chance of survival. The method used was cruel and merciless, which indicated that it was not an impulsive act, but something premeditated. Randy Maidens, her own husband, was the main suspect, especially as he was missing and had left no sign of life. The discovery of the crime came as a shock to everyone who knew Rachael. The police quickly began a detailed investigation, trying to piece together what had happened. The fact that Randy was missing and had left a suicide note further increased suspicion about him. In the note, Randy apologized to his daughter Natalie and Rachel's relatives, but also mentioned what he called Rachel's impossible character, as if he was trying to justify his actions. Investigators began collecting evidence at the crime scene. The blood splattered on the walls and floor, the bullet casings, the shotgun abandoned on the sofa, everything was carefully documented. They also found $87,000 in cash in the trunk of Randy's car, as well as another $9,000 in the house, which suggested that Randy was planning to flee after committing the crime. Neighbors' security cameras showed images of Randy wandering around the neighborhood in the hours following the murder, trying unsuccessfully to find a place to hide. Enjoying the case? If you're a fan of true crime stories and intriguing mysteries, give us a like and subscribe to the Mystery Detective channel. That way, you won't miss any shocking cases like this one. Moving on, the local authorities, in collaboration with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, organized a large-scale search for Randy. Helicopters flew over the area, while special forces searched the surrounding area, fearing that he was armed and dangerous. The normally quiet Brentwood community was in a state of shock and fear. No one knew where Randy might be or what he planned to do next. Finally, after 12 hours of intense searching, Randy Maidens emerged from a wooded area near his home, his hands raised in surrender to the authorities. He was dirty, exhausted, and seemed to have lost all willpower. However, this did not diminish the horror of what he had done. Randy was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder, abandonment of the incapacitated, and tampering with evidence. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the unstable behavior he had displayed over the previous months only reinforced the idea that he was on a downward spiral that culminated in the brutal murder of his wife. With Randy in custody, the investigation continued to focus on understanding the motives and mental state that led him to commit such a terrible crime. The community was in shock, not only at the brutality of the murder, but also at how a seemingly perfect family had fallen apart in such a tragic way. Investigators interviewed friends, family, and neighbors, trying to find out what could have led Randy to turn from a respected businessman into a cold-blooded killer. Meanwhile, prosecutors began putting together the case against Randy, aware that this would be a difficult trial, especially given his erratic behavior and apparent lack of remorse for what he had done. During the investigation, the police began to piece together what really happened on the night Rachael Maidens was murdered. One of the first crucial clues was the testimony of neighbors who reported seeing Randy acting strangely on the day of the murder. Security cameras showed Randy wandering around the neighborhood, trying to open doors of other people's houses as if looking for a place to hide. These videos were key to understanding Randy's mental state shortly after the murder. In addition to the images, investigators found a suicide note left by Randy. Although he didn't specify in the note what he had done, the letter suggested that he was aware of the weight of his actions. In it, he apologized to his daughter and Rachel's family, while at the same time complaining about Rachel's behavior, implying that the constant fighting between them had brought him to breaking point. This attempt to justify the crime in the note was seen as evidence of premeditation, since Randy clearly reflected on his actions before and after committing them. During questioning, Randy tried to present an inconsistent alibi, claiming that he had no intention of killing Rachael and that it was all a terrible accident. He suggested that the situation got out of hand during an argument, but the evidence didn't support this version. The presence of multiple weapons and the number of shots fired indicated that the murder was a deliberate act, not an accident in the heat of the moment. Contradictions began to emerge when investigators compared Randy's statements with the physical evidence found at the crime scene. Randy claimed that the shots were fired in self-defense after an intense argument, but Rachael's autopsy revealed that she was shot in the back, indicating that she was trying to flee or protect herself when she was killed. In addition, the attempt to clean up the crime scene with bleach showed an attempt to cover up what had happened, which contradicted the idea of an accidental crime. When the case went to trial, the prosecution put together a solid case against Randy Maidens, using the evidence collected and the testimonies of several people close to the couple. The trial began in September 2014 and attracted a lot of attention, mainly due to the brutality of the crime and the public profile of Rachael Maidens, a respected orthodontist in the community. During the trial, the prosecutor argued that Randy had planned his wife's murder. The evidence presented included the suicide note, security camera recordings, and inconsistencies in Randy's statements. The prosecutors pointed out that Randy was going through a moment of deep despair, aggravated by alcohol and possibly drug abuse, which culminated in the act of violence against Rachael. They argued that instead of seeking help or trying to solve his problems, Randy chose the path of violence. One of the most impactful testimonies was that of Rachael's mother, Betty Frisbee, who described the couple's relationship and the signs that something was wrong in the months leading up to the crime. She said that Randy had become increasingly distant and erratic, leaving Rachael worried and frightened. Betty also mentioned the phone call she received from Randy on the day of the murder, where he seemed disoriented and desperate, which led her to call the police. Her testimony brought to light the pain and despair of the family, who were still trying to understand how something so horrible could have happened. Another crucial testimony was that of a close friend of Randy's, who revealed that Randy had mentioned in a casual conversation that he sometimes fantasized about what his life would be like without Rachael. Although these words were not taken seriously at the time, they took on a sinister weight in the light of events. This testimony helped paint a picture of a man who, while not openly demonstrating his plans, was clearly considering how to get rid of his wife. Throughout the trial, the defense tried to argue that Randy was not in full control of his mental faculties at the time of the crime, suggesting that he might have acted under the influence of substances or in a state of extreme stress. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming, and the attempt to justify the crime as an act of desperation did not convince the jury. The jurors were led to understand that Randy Maidens had committed a brutal and calculated crime, motivated by a desire to escape from a life he felt was out of control. The fact that he tried to clean up the crime scene and run away after the murder only reinforced the idea that he knew exactly what he was doing and that his actions were premeditated. Randy Maidens' trial came to an end with a sentence that generated a lot of controversy. After considering all the evidence and testimony, the court decided to convict him of second-degree murder rather than first-degree murder due to the deal he made with the prosecution. This decision was met with shock and outrage by Rachael's family and many in the community who had expected a harsher sentence. Randy was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole during his sentence. This meant that he would have to serve the full sentence, but even so, many believed that the sentence did not do justice to the brutal crime he had committed. The decision to accept a plea bargain was made by the prosecution mainly to avoid a long and painful trial that could further traumatize the couple's young daughter, Natalie. The prosecution explained that although the sentence was not as severe as expected, it was important to consider the welfare of Natalie, who had already lost her mother tragically and did not need to be exposed to a prolonged trial full of disturbing details about her mother's murder. The impact of this case on the Brentwood community was profound. Brentwood, known for being one of the safest cities in the United States, was shaken by the brutality of the crime. The case brought up discussions about the safety of elite communities where it is assumed that tragedy tragedies of this kind simply don't happen. The fact that such a respected and successful family was destroyed in such a violent way forced many to reconsider their assumptions about the quiet life they led. Many residents began to question the extent to which they really knew their neighbors and what might be going on behind the closed doors of their seemingly perfect homes. In the legal system, the case of Randy Maidens also sparked debates about the effectiveness of plea bargains in crimes as serious as murder. The decision to offer Randy a plea bargain was criticized by many who believed that he should have been tried for first-degree murder, which could have resulted in a life sentence or even the death penalty, considering the premeditated nature of the crime. The controversy surrounding the sentence left many wondering if justice had really been done. The lessons learned from this case are profound and multifaceted. One of the main lessons is the importance of recognizing and acting on the warning signs in abusive relationships. Randy's erratic behavior in the months leading up to the crime was a clear indication that something was deeply wrong. However, these signs were not taken seriously enough, which resulted in a tragedy that could have been avoided. Rachael Maidens' story serves as a grim reminder that even in relationships that seem perfect on the outside, there can be serious problems that, if left unaddressed, can lead to fatal consequences. Another important lesson is the need for a legal system that is truly fair and reflects the seriousness of the crimes committed. The plea deal offered to Randy Maidens was seen by many as a failure of the system, as he received a relatively light sentence for such a horrific crime. This raised questions about the way the justice system treats cases involving individuals from high social and economic classes, suggesting that there may be an inequality in the application of justice. Currently, Randy Maidens continues to serve his sentence in a state penitentiary in Tennessee. He has little contact with the outside world, especially with his daughter Natalie, who was raised by her grandmother, Betty Frisbee. Betty took custody of Natalie after Rachel's death, trying to offer her granddaughter as normal a life as possible despite the tragedy that shook her family. Natalie's life, however, would never be the same. She grew up knowing that her father had taken her mother's life, a heavy burden for any child to carry. The Brentwood community, for its part, still feels the impact of this crime. The Maidens mansion has been sold and new residents have moved in, but the memory of what happened there still hangs over the neighborhood. The case left an indelible mark on the town, which is now seen as a reminder that even in the safest of places, danger can lurk, and that no one is really immune to life's tragedies. This tragic case shows us how appearances can be deceptive and how, even in the safest communities, the unexpected can happen. Rachael Maidens' story is a grim reminder that evil can be closer than we think, and that behind the doors of a seemingly perfect house, there can be terrible secrets. While Randy serves his sentence, the scars left by his actions will never fully heal, especially for his daughter Natalie, who grew up without her parents because of one night of violence. Now, detectives, if this story has impacted you as much as it has me, I invite you to continue with us on this path of unraveling the darkest mysteries. The next video will surprise you even more with a case that defies comprehension and makes us question what we really know about those around us. Do you have any suggestions for cases or mysteries you'd like to see here? Leave it in the comments. Who knows, maybe your suggestion will make it into our next video. Click on the next video and discover another gripping mystery that will leave you speechless. If you like suspenseful stories, this one is a must-see. Don't forget to subscribe to the Detective of Mysteries channel so you don't miss any of the details of the next investigations. And if you've made it this far, comment "I'm part of the investigation" so I know you're with us all the way. Until the next investigation, detectives, may the clues guide you to the truth.